I've always believed cities tell you who built them, if you know where to look. A skyline isn't just steel and glass, it's ego. Hierarchy. Legacy etched in concrete. Halden City was no exception. The Braxtons had their fingerprints on every high-rise from the riverbanks to the historic district. And I, Graham Vale, was the ghost in their machine. Every zoning loophole they needed, I found. Every impossible city vote, I massaged. Every draft model presented to investors had my quiet handwriting in the margins. But no byline. That was the unspoken rule. I was the genius they could own. I didn't care, not at first. I told myself I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to build. The Braxton Quarter was my magnum opus. A $400 million redevelopment dream. 10 blocks of urban decay turned into parks, smart homes, and towers that kissed the clouds. It was ambitious, messy, and deeply flawed when I inherited the blueprint. I stripped it down to bone and rebuilt it block by block. And for a while, I thought I was earning something more than a paycheck. I thought I was earning family. Elise, Vincent Braxton's daughter, was elegance with bite. A quick mind. A sharper tongue. She admired my ideas, then my drive, then me. Or at least I thought she did. We married quietly. No grand ballroom. Just City Hall and a honeymoon spent in hard hats touring construction sites. She joked she fell for me because I knew the city better than any tour guide. I believed her. I believed a lot of things. But small details started cracking through the foundation. Her phone, always upside down on the table. Sudden late meetings. A shift in her scent when she came home late, less citrus, more musk. She stopped laughing at my tired work jokes. She stopped asking where I'd been. So I stopped asking too. Because deep down I already knew. But I didn't confront her. Not then. I did what I always do, I planned. I gathered data. I watched. And when the quarter's final proposal went to the city with Colin Reeves' name in the credits instead of mine, something in me snapped, but not in anger. In clarity. Colin, the networking guru, project visionary, and Elise's high school ex. I knew his kind. Gloss over substance. He waltzed into meetings after the deals were done and took credit like it was his job. Because it was. He didn't just take my work. He was taking everything. I stayed late that night in the office, long after security shut off the lights. I stood over the Braxton Quarter scale model, my model, and turned the lights on underneath it. The whole thing glowed. Every fiber of it bore my design. My logic. My math. And that's when I realized I didn't have to fight them. I just had to make sure they kept building on my foundation, while I changed what was underneath. So I opened my laptop, and I installed something I built a long time ago. A way to watch Elise. Not out of jealousy. Not even pain. Just confirmation. Confirmation came on a Thursday. The kind of gray Halden sky that never quite rains, just lingers. Like suspicion. Elise said she was meeting with the city council's culture liaison. But the liaison, Thomas Quinn, was on leave. I knew that because I'd drafted half his talking points over the last year. The tracker I slipped onto her key fob a week earlier lit up at 6:42 p.m. She was nowhere near City Hall. She was headed toward the Algren Hotel. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I sat alone in my car outside a shuttered diner across the street from the office. I watched the dot on my screen pause at the valet stand, then blink steadily as it settled into the building. Room 918. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in months, focus. I went home. I poured a drink. I opened a new project folder on my desktop and titled it Echo_V1. There was no need for confrontation. People like Elise and Colin don't deny. They pivot. Gaslight. Twist. I didn't want an apology. I wanted leverage. The next few days blurred into strategy. A memory card hidden in a fountain pen. Voice captures synced to cloud. Room 918 became a pattern, Mondays, Thursdays. Like a calendar entry for betrayal. I archived it all. GPS logs. Audio fragments. Receipts. Enough to sync them socially, professionally, financially. But I wasn't ready to use it, not yet. Colin's name started surfacing in pitch meetings more often. Colin thinks we need more vertical gardens. Colin's proposing a rooftop amphitheater. Colin has real synergy with council. Every line was my design, just with his voice attached. I waited. Not out of weakness, but timing. And the opening came faster than I expected. Vincent Braxton summoned me for a strategic alignment review. That's what the invite said. I'd seen those go both ways. Either they're grooming you for something bigger, or preparing to drop the axe clean. When I walked into the conference room, Elise was already there, sitting beside her father like she belonged on the board now. Colin stood behind them, one hand in his pocket, pretending he wasn't part of the performance. "Graham," Vincent said, smiling that boardroom shark smile, "we appreciate everything you've contributed, but we're moving in a different direction." Just like that. No thank you. No handshake. Elise didn't even look at me. She just slid a manila folder across the glass table. Inside, my severance package, a 2-line HR letter, and a typed note in Elise's handwriting. For transition planning. Paperclip to it? A brochure for Kenslow residences. Transitional housing for displaced professionals. I stared at it for a moment. Then I smiled. "That's thoughtful," I said calmly. "You've planned this for a while." Elise's eyes narrowed. "It wasn't personal." "It never is," I replied. "Until it is." I stood, took the folder, and walked out. Not angry. Not broken. Because what they didn't know was that they had just given me my clearance to begin. I wasn't going to fight for my name on a building. I was going to let them build their empire on a fault line and wait for the first tremor. The thing about being erased is, if you know it's coming, you can plan for it. I walked out of Braxton Development that day with a severance folder in my hand and something much more valuable in my head, a complete map of their weak points. Elise thought I'd be angry, that I'd yell, plead, unravel. But I'd already begun detaching, piece by piece. By the time she handed me that brochure for transitional housing, I wasn't just done with them, I was already elsewhere. What no one in that room knew was that I'd signed a lease 2 weeks earlier. Not downtown, not near the luxury high-rises they called home, but in Bayhust, on the industrial edge of Halden. A district with no elevators, no egos, just silence. Apartment 5C. 5th floor, no doorman. The kind of place nobody thinks to look. It wasn't much, bare walls, a mattress, an old drafting table. But it had what I needed, control. I set up what I called the grid, a layout of information, timelines, financials, names, movements. I printed everything I'd archived. Elise's hotel visits. Colin's double dealings. Vincent's bribery history. All pinned and strung like a spiderweb across the wall. And at the center of that web, Braxton Quarter. They thought they owned the future of Halden. What they didn't realize was that they'd buried their future inside my design. My original model had contingencies, load-bearing algorithms, sub-foundation calibration tolerances, impact tests, fine-tuned by months of research. But just before I was cut out, Colin requested minor changes to the site layout, move a parking structure, widen a plaza, make it pop. I said sure. I gave him a modified version, one that looked functional, one that even passed basic stress tests. But I designed it with a flaw, invisible to anyone rushing to cut corners. Structural integrity that would slowly degrade under shifting seasonal loads. Not catastrophic, just compromising. Delayed instability. I had no intention of hurting anyone, just the Braxtons' illusion of permanence. They stole my legacy, so I turned it into a time bomb. But I couldn't pull this off alone. That's when I reached out to Tessa Lynn. Tessa had been my intern 6 months ago. Smart. Quiet. Too principled for a place like Braxton. She once flagged a fake invoice routed through a shell firm and was immediately reassigned to storage audits. That told me everything I needed to know. I sent her one message. If you still think something's off with the quarter, meet me tomorrow. Bring nothing. Speak to no one. She showed up the next day. No questions, just a nod. They think you're gone, she said. That's the idea. And just like that, Phase 4 began. Not revenge. Not yet. We started with exposure. Quietly. Deliberately. From the shadows, we would show them what happens when you build an empire on someone else's foundation. Then pretend they never existed. Everything has a blueprint. Even collapse. The Braxtons were busy erecting towers. Meanwhile, Tessa and I were laying out the blueprint for something else entirely. Exposure. Consequence. Echo. From Apartment 5C, we rebuilt everything they tried to erase. Every project document, cost analysis, and zoning email Elise deleted from my shared drive. Tessa had kept backups, hidden in disconnected thumb drives and buried inside mislabeled folders. A ghost archive. In it, we found something more useful than corruption. We found patterns. Shell companies used to move cash. Kickbacks disguised as community reinvestment grants. Payments to a fake environmental consultancy in South Carolina. Vincent Braxton had spent decades laundering risk into opportunity. Elise wasn't just complicit. She was instrumental. She'd restructured compliance after our wedding, moved key reporting functions under her own name. The paper trail now led directly to her. It would have almost been impressive if it wasn't so careless. We organized everything into a digital vault, secure and partitioned across 4 cloud backups. I labeled the folder Aftershock/primary payload. It wasn't just blackmail. It was insurance. Justice. A tool, not for destruction but precision. We ran simulations. Release timelines. Contingencies. If I disappeared, the documents would go out on a drip feed to every investigative journalist within 300 miles. If I was captured, it would drop in full. Tessa set up the scheduling failsafe. This is nuclear, she warned. No, I said. Nuclear is fast. This is slow. Measured. Surgical. Then came the silent calls. I'd purchased 20 prepaid phones from a bus terminal kiosk. Random numbers. Different cities. Different towers. No trace. Every few nights, one would call Elise. Another would ring Vincent. Always silent. Always brief. Then hang up. It wasn't harassment. It was presence. A whisper that the past wasn't buried. That someone was watching. Listening. I wasn't trying to scare them. Not yet. I just wanted them to feel something they hadn't in years. Uncertainty. The same uncertainty I'd lived with while they made their decisions behind mirrored glass doors and locked inboxes. Then the packages. I sent the first to Braxton Development's executive floor, wrapped in matte black paper, no return address. Inside, a USB stick. A photograph of me at the quarter site 5 years ago, in a hard hat, smiling. A classified copy of a military personnel file. My father's file. Curtis Thorne. Signal Corps. Intelligence and tactical countermeasures. Elise knew the name Vale. But not Thorne. Graham Vale was the quiet one. The compliant one. The draft table romantic who believed loyalty could be earned. But Micah Thorne? He was something else. He was his father's son. My identity was never a secret. It was a reserve. A contingency. One I never thought I'd need to activate. But once they exiled me, it became my edge. Vincent Braxton used to brag about being a kingmaker. Let's see how he handles a ghost in the machine. I kept my movements invisible, burner routers, no phone with GPS, cash only. Tessa served as the bridge to the outside world, feeding me sanitized updates. One evening she returned, face pale. They're beginning to panic, she said. Colin's been calling Elise nonstop. She's locked down her social accounts. They brought in a private security consultant. I smiled. Good. Let them burn fuel chasing shadows. But that was just emotional response. What mattered more was what they hadn't done yet. They hadn't touched the structure. Braxton Quarter was under full construction now. Concrete frames rising like bones from the dirt. Steel beams braced on top of Colin's design enhancements. Enhancements I'd made sure had consequences. The flaw I embedded wasn't a dramatic failure. It was a slow rot, a degradation in lateral pressure distribution during seasonal shifts. The kind of thing no one would notice until the stress scans started ringing hollow. We didn't need to sabotage anything. We just needed to wait. And while they laid floor after floor on a compromised skeleton, Tessa and I built something stronger. A rival firm. A new identity. A rebirth. Not revenge. Redirection. Because when Phase 5 hit, I wouldn't just reappear. I would reclaim everything they tried to build over me. And I wouldn't use force. I'd use gravity. The gravity of truth. Of silence. Of precision collapse. Collapse that begins now. Collapse doesn't announce itself. It creaks first. Then shifts. Then something you once trusted gives way. And the entire frame twists in silence. That was Braxton Quarter. And I was the silence. The first crack came during a site audit. A junior engineer named Rami Cord noticed minor stress fractures along the southeast retaining wall. Hairline but widening. Misaligned with predicted seasonal drift. Colin dismissed it. Normal settlement, he said. It's clay soil. Rami filed a report anyway. I know because I leaked the backup calculations to him anonymously. Documents that proved the material ratios had been altered after my original design had been replaced. 2 days later, Rami went on leave. No one said why. Elise must have known by then that something was wrong. But her pride was always stronger than her paranoia. And Vincent? He was too busy trying to secure foreign investment to notice the floor shifting beneath him. That's when I made my next move. I booked a room at the Sable Union Hotel under the name Micah Vale Thorne. A quiet rooftop bar, leather chairs, soft jazz. The kind of place where business journalists like to meet anonymous sources. I left a sealed envelope for Renee Yates, investigative reporter at the Halden Chronicle. Inside, the complete whistleblower package from Aftershock/Primary Payload. A sworn affidavit signed under my legal birth name. And a USB drive titled, Graham Vale was here. She published her story 5 days later. Headline: Skeletons Beneath the Skyline. Braxton Development Under Fire for Corruption, Fraud, and Structural Cover-Ups. The article detonated like I'd planned. Not a bomb. A controlled implosion. Subpoenas followed. Anonymous whistleblower forums exploded. The Halden Zoning Commission opened a formal inquiry. Investors pulled out one by one, then in waves. I stayed hidden. Not in fear. In discipline. Because the final phase hadn't arrived yet. But it was close. I watched Elise Braxton give a press conference on a marble dais, framed by steel towers she never designed. Her voice cracked as she denied the allegations. These attacks are the work of a disgruntled former employee. She was right, just not in the way she thought. And then came the photo. One of the engineers leaked a site surveillance still. A figure standing at the edge of the construction zone, hands in pockets, watching. The image was grainy, but the outline was clear. Me. It went viral on architecture forums. The ghost designer returns. Tessa sent me a link and just wrote, "It's time." So I called a press conference of my own. Not flashy. Not overdone. Just a quiet, precise reintroduction. My name is Graham Vale. I designed Braxton Quarter. They cut me out, stole my work, falsified the blueprint, and compromised the city's future. I won't let that stand. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. But I wasn't finished. Starting today, I'm launching my own firm. A firm that builds with integrity, not arrogance. And our first project will rise just 4 blocks from Braxton Quarter. That night, Vincent Braxton emptied his downtown office. Elise deleted her social accounts. Colin issued a vague denial and disappeared from the scene. And me? I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. Phase 6 would be something new. Not exposure. Not sabotage. Creation. Reclamation. Legacy. I'd burned what needed burning. Now I would build. Destruction clears the ground, but only vision rebuilds it. The day after my press conference, I walked the 4 blocks from Braxton Quarter to the vacant lot I'd quietly acquired under the holding name Ravix Urban. This was where it would begin again. Not in revenge, in reclamation. "Are you sure you want this here?" Tessa asked, scanning the crumbling fence line. Still in Braxton's shadow. I shook my head. Not in their shadow. Over it. We named it the Vale Project. Not a tower. A concept. A manifesto in glass, steel, and stone. Transparent design, renewable core, and a space dedicated to young architects who had been left behind by the industry. Within 2 weeks of my announcement, the whispers started. Graham Vale's firm just secured funding from Titan Equity. A former Braxton engineer defected to his team. Did you see his design preview? Braxton Development tried to downplay it. Misguided publicity, Vincent told the Journal. But they were already bleeding staff and stock value. Elise went quiet. No more statements. No lawsuits. She knew anything filed in court would unleash the vault. And I wasn't done with them, yet. While Tessa oversaw build logistics, I focused on culture. We hired ex-whistleblowers, mid-tier designers with vision but no voice, and one intern I'd met years ago who had once drawn a housing prototype on the back of a bar napkin. I paid him market rate and told him to build it. Because this wasn't just about a building. It was about rewriting the rules. We didn't pitch with buzzwords or empty renderings. We showed integrity maps, detailed, explainable justifications for every design and budget decision. Journalists noticed. Clients noticed. The city noticed. I remember the day permits were approved for Phase 1 of Vale Center. I was sitting at the same cafe where Elise once told me I lacked vision. The barista recognized me from the press conference. "You're the one who with the tower?" I nodded. He smiled. "They say you made it fall without touching it." I didn't respond. Just sipped my coffee. Because what he said was almost true. I didn't bring Braxton down by force. I made them face themselves. I held up a mirror, stepped aside, and let gravity and guilt do what I couldn't. And now, In the clearing of that collapse, I was building something that couldn't be stolen. Not just my name. Not just my legacy. A movement. Tessa came into the cafe with blueprints under her arm and that half-smirk she always wore when plans started aligning. 3 investors want in. 2 more journalists are asking for interviews. And guess who just applied for a junior analyst role? I glanced over. She showed me the resume. Colin Maddox. We both laughed. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had leverage. And when you build with leverage, not rage, you don't just outlast the old world. You replace it.